Just some quick little things about the show. It's Crucia unfortunately will not be here, but I do have Frank Marchese with me today. How you doing, Frank?
As walking dead as could be, but I'm doing all right.
All right, well, it's good to have you on the show. And so today we'll start off with a little mini rant by me about the moves that the San Diego Padres have made. As most of you know, I am a San Diego Padres fan, uh, born and raised in San Diego, and
It says so on the website.
and I've been through some good times, a lot of bad times, and this one has got to be one of the darkest times for to be a Padres fan. As it's just getting more frustrating, honestly, being a Padres fan with them either letting their our superstars go or trading them away. Most notably letting Justin Upton go, trading away James Shields, who to be fair, it was probably time for him to go. But then in the most recent trade we made, just I believe today it was announced. The Padres traded Andrew Kashner and Collin Raye to the Marlins for a couple prospects. And Kashner, I can understand. He's had kind of a rough start so far, 4-7 with a 4.76 ERA in 16 starts, and so he started to kind of fall off a little bit. You would want him to be playing a little bit better than he has. It seemed as though he is getting up there. He's 29, where obviously the Padres are not going to contend for the World Series or even be in the playoff contention for quite some time. And so I understand that move, but then trading Collin Raye, who, granted, he's 26, so I mean it's not like he's a huge prospect. He had some good years, or he had some good games so far, 5-5 with a 4.98 ERA in 19 games this year. Like I said, he had a couple of good performances, but a 4.98 ERA. I can understand them wanting to kind of build from trying to. I don't know if it's more tanking or just not seeing what other people might see in Colin Ray, but we traded those two for the Marlins pitching prospect, or the Marlins traded Jared Cosart, Carter Capps, Luis Castillo, and first baseman prospect Josh Naylor for Cashner and Rea, which a lot of Luis Castillo, he's getting up there in age, so he's not really a prospect. But Josh Naylor, that's one that I'm somewhat all right with that, with him making it. He was a first round pick in last year's MLB draft, only 19 years old, so it's a good prospect to get. And it's just with all these trades happening from the Padres, obviously it's frustrating. We're just this year we traded away Cashner, Ray, Guerrero, Rodney, Shields, and Melvin Upton Jr. Who that Melvin Upton Jr. I did not understand trading him away at all. He was he played very very well this year, and then we traded him to the Blue Jays for a couple prospects. But I mean, it's more, I guess, with trading for prospects, you trade guaranteed talent kind of for these guys that could hit or could not pan out. And hopefully, the prospects that we've got could pan out, and we might be able to, to pull something out and be an above 500 team when these guys eventually get to the major league level. But for me, it's almost as if I'm a somewhat Padres fan at this point, as there's just been a rough couple of years so far and a rough couple of years to come for Padres fans out there. And so hopefully the front office can make some better decisions as far as making or letting players go and trading players, or hopefully these prospects pan out. But at this point, it's just you have to wait and see. Obviously, we're not contending for playoffs at this point, with our record being as it is. But like I said, hopefully we can play better, and or we can the front office can do better in these trades and letting players go. But other than that, that's all I have to say on the subject of the Padres.
When you look at a guy like Melvin Upton Jr., who has had a fantastic year for the Padres thus far, And you look at guys like Collin Raye. I got a very rude welcome into the world of Collin Raye in the first game that the Mets played against the Padres this year out in Petco Park, where he threw 8 innings of 3-hit ball and allowed 1 run, and I believe didn't allow a hit until the 7th inning. So I was very, very impressed by Collin Raye early in the year. Like I said, a guy like Melvin Upton Jr. has had a fantastic year. This is a guy who is not, is not in the future plans of the Padres to get young. He's in his mid-30s, on the back end of his prime. This is a guy who has the possibility, if he's having a good season, which he was, that was going to be traded. Andrew Cashner, you've admitted a couple years ago, I think maybe last year, you admitted that you guys got the raw end of the stick on the Rizzo trade, and giving away Cashner now is pretty much solidifying that, yeah, we're done with that trade. As far as, I don't know much about Tyron Guerrero, who the Padres also gave up in this. I believe Carter Capps is the guy who has the that weird delivery where he like hops off the rubber. I know there was one of those Marlins pitchers.
Yeah, it is Carter Capps.
It is. Then you're looking at Jarrett Cozart, who's a solid pitcher. Again, you bring up the pitching prospect Luis Castillo, who is starting to get up there in age, but you look at a guy like Josh Naylor, who's Miami's number 2 ranked prospect by MLB Pipeline. These are the kind of guys that you have to look at, and I would not be surprised if they started to make this trade when they made the Fernando Rodney trade. There are a couple of guys that you're looking for when you make a trade like that. And if you're looking to try to take a couple of guys from a certain team, that's definitely something you would talk about while you're making the first trade. Again, this is for the Padres. I think you were right in saying that it was time to let go of James Shields. He did not flourish into the number 1 ace starter that the Padres had expected of him coming into the team. Whether or not Kemp was having a good season, he's got too big a contract. You're not going to be able to move it. Maybe I think the last guy you might see go would be Derek Norris as a possibility. If the Padres want, I think the Padres have done everything right as far as this teardown. You'll know when they start doing stuff wrong when they trade a guy like Will Myers, who is still very young, very good. Then they're doing something wrong.
And speaking, you mentioned Josh Naylor. I'm happy getting him, and according to MLB Pipeline, he fits in as the Padres' number 4 prospect as of now. So I guess it's more for the frustrations coming from me is that we're trading away talent that has been proven for these prospects that could turn out to be great or could be busts. We've been burned in the past by a lot of trades.
And I understand that completely, but it's you come to a point where this team has not been competitive in the division for 4 or 5 years now. It's been so. I mean, of course, you want the best players you could possibly have on the team, no doubt. But if you have the best players that you could possibly have and they're not winning, then there's no sense in keeping them around. You got to mix something up, and that's what the Padres have gotten themselves into. They've got good names, having good years, having good single years. Get them out, invest in the future, which is something you hear a lot out of this team. But again, you hope for the best in situations like these, because I think in these 2 or 3 trades that the Padres have made this year already, they've got 2 or 3 guys in the top 5 now, 2 or 3 guys, new guys in the top 5 prospects of their team. So they've definitely caught some big name fishes out of this, no pun intended, but they've definitely caught some big names out of these trades.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this team pans out. Like you mentioned, if we trade Will Myers, I don't know what to do.
Yeah,
You
no,
you still
then ownership has no idea what they're doing. If I'm ownership, I'm sitting Will Myers down at the end of this year and signing him to a franchise player contract. Like it was right around this time in their careers when David Wright and Jose Reyes for the Mets got their big contracts of like 6 years, $66 million or something like that. You can give that to Will Myers right now and he'd probably accept it. So then you have Will Myers locked up for 6 years. He's the face of the rebuild, and it's not a ridiculous contract where you can't move him if you need to move him.
yeah. I mean, it's a lot of this has come from past experiences. You mentioned the Anthony Rizzo trade, who that still haunts me getting Cashner for Rizzo, who is one of the best first basemen in
I
the
remember, I
Major League right
remember,
now.
I remember being at a game, and I went into the Western Supply Building down at the bottom when they with at the Padres store. He was there for like a week, and there was another week left of the season. And I said, "Wow, everywhere Rizzo jerseys." I'm like, "Wow, you're really pushing this Rizzo kid." And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, we are." And he plays the last week of the year, and then the first month in the postseason, the first month during the off season, he's gone. I'm like, well, glad you guys pushed him because you pushed him right out.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be, as I said, interesting to see how this Padres team ends up doing in the future. A lot of it is just I just have to keep an open mind, I guess, of who we're getting rid of and who we're getting. As you mentioned, a lot of the trades that we've made have landed us some top prospects that are that have come into the farm system. Hopefully, can pan out. And with Miami, there is another player that is very notable, the great Ichiro Suzuki, coming nearing the end of his career, but also nearing a huge milestone. That would be 3,000 hits. A milestone that not many players hit in their career, and it'll he's near. I think he's at either one or two hits
He's at
away from
he's at
3,000.
he's at 29.98.
So only two hits away from 3,000 hits on his career. I mean, he's one of those players that's going to be remembered for a long time, mainly with the Mariners. But he is, I mean, he's a great player, and he's still contributing to the Marlins. To be fair, he hasn't gotten the appearances that he probably should be getting in order to get closer to that 3,000 hit. A lot of these opportunities have come from pinch hit pinch hit opportunities and all that, but I imagine they're going to start giving him some more if it starts getting closer to the end of the season. He still hasn't hit that, although he should be able to get those two last hits
I mean,
very soon.
you give the guy 2 months to get two hits. I mean, you play him on the last game and you'll get those. But I mean, when you're trying to break in, when you're 42 or some odd years old like Ichiro is, and you're trying to break into an outfield of Christian Yelich, Marcelo Zuna, and Giancarlo Stanton, it's you're not breaking into that. You're not breaking into that outfield, especially with the season that Ozuna's had this year. Ichiro does not play left field. His natural position is right field, and God forbid you put Ichiro Suzuki in over Giancarlo Stanton. Um, to me, it's he's going to get it this week. He's going to get it against Cincinnati. He's going to get it against St. Louis, who come in tonight. Um, when you and this, by the way, is a legitimate 3,000 major league hits. This isn't that whole bogus 40 some odd thousand whatever they tried to pull over our eyes last month. This is this is the real thing. This is 3,000 major league hits. He is definitely one of the greatest hitters of all time. And just think, if he would have spent a vast majority of his career in the United States, maybe we are talking either this year or possibly the beginning of next year, talking about him breaking Pete Rose's all-time hits record.
Yeah, I mean he's one of the best. You mentioned one of the best hitters in that we've seen in Major League Baseball, pretty much in his prime. Whenever he was in the game, you would expect him to get at least one hit, many multiple game hits. But with that, we will take a short little break. We'll be back right after this. Don't go away. And welcome back to Mix Up Sports Live. And we're gonna start off here with some more trade deadline news in MLB. One name that is pretty much it's very hot at the moment. Jonathan Lucroy of the Brewers, linked to multiple teams, including the Mets, Tigers, Indians, just to name a few. And I mean, it almost seems like a given that he's going to be traded by the end of today, but or by the trade deadline. But it will. I mean, who knows? The Brewers might keep him, but it definitely seems very likely that Lucroy will be on the move. He's a hot name on pretty much every team. Still fairly young, and a great catcher, great hitter. I don't know who. It's tough to predict what team he might go to. I know you're probably hoping for him to go to the Mets, Frankie.
Oh yeah. Especially when the option between is Jonathan Lucroy, who's batting 300 with 13 home runs and 50 RBIs, or Travis d'Arnaud, who's batting 246 with 2 home runs and like 10 RBIs, having spent half the season on the disabled list. Yeah, I'll take Jonathan Lucroy because the second he comes onto the team, he leads the team in home run, leads the team in batting average, third or fourth on the team in home runs, and second on the team in RBIs. Um, I'm looking here saying that the Braves, as of 2:49 Eastern, the Braves have now inquired about Lucroy, even though it says they're very, very unlikely to strike a deal. But the reports are it looks as though it could be Travis d'Arnaud or possibly Ahmed Rosario, and hopefully not first baseman Dominic Smith, um, going to going back to Milwaukee. I would hope that it would be Travis d'Arnaud and Ahmed Rosario. Dominic Smith is a first baseman. I think he's like second or third on the Mets and prospect list. I really, really would not want to see him go.
And what complicates things a little bit is Jonathan Lucroy. He does have an interesting no trade clause. He can block a trade to the Twins, Angels, Athletics, Padres, Mariners, Nationals, and the Indians and Tigers. And so,
Oh,
uh,
and the Indians and Tigers. Notice the Mets aren't on that list.
yeah, so that's one thing you got going for the Mets is that he can't block a trade if he is shipped out to the Mets. That's
See,
his.
of all the things the Mets have gotten screwed on over these last few years, with Harvey and Zach Wheeler going down, and just the Bobby Bonilla contract. Good Lord, we'll be paying him $1 million for the next 20 years, literally. We actually need a player, and we're not going to get screwed over. That's nice. I love that.
So I mean, it doesn't close the door for any of those other teams, but it definitely he does have the option if they work out a trade and say nope, not going, trades off the table. So the Mets are looking quite likely if they're able to strike a deal. Jonathan Lucroy has no power to trade anywhere.
I think he might decline the trade to Detroit if I were to guess. But if he declines that trade to Cleveland, I would be very surprised, especially since they're leading that division so fair-handedly.
Yeah, that's a pretty good destination for Lucroy to end up. They need a catcher, and for him to come into that team, he's I believe I said he was somewhat still somewhat young. He is 30 years old, so more of a obviously not going to be a prospect by any means, but he's going to be someone that
If he wants a guaranteed playoff spot and Cleveland appears to be the front runner, I see he'll go to Cleveland.
yeah,
But if
that
he
does seem like a
yeah,
great location for him.
especially since they're in first place by as much as they are, I think it's like 6 or 7 games. They're in first place in that AL Central, which sounds kind of weird, especially since we were talking about the middle of May, the two teams out of Chicago being the two best teams in baseball. They got a 4.5 game lead over the Tigers and an 8.5 game lead over the White Sox. So
Yes, I mean if he goes to the Indians, that definitely puts him into the definitely lifts them into the talk of contending for a World Series title instead of just making a playoff spot. They have a great lineup already. Adding Lucroy to that could be very dangerous for any other teams that have to face him come postseason time. So that is definitely a great trade for the Indians to make if they can work it out, just to make that last piece into the playoff puzzle. And another trade rumor would for the Nationals, their right-hand pitcher Lucas Giolito could be shipped to the Yankees for Andrew Miller. It seems as though it might be just a straight up deal, Giolito for Miller. And if that happens, I mean the Nationals they are pushing for the playoffs. Uh, the Yankees already traded Chapman, so it does seem as though they're more sellers than buyers, as they realize that even if they make the playoffs, even if they can, they're not really going to make any noise in there. So it's better just to get some prospects.
Once again, more proof you guys don't listen to my show. Um, the Yankees said last week, which I thought was the smartest move they could have made, and then they said Miller was off the table. But when it comes to a guy like Lucas Giolito, he's only had a handful of starts in the major leagues. I believe he just got sent back down to the minors. Not because he was pitching poorly, but just because he could use a little bit more time and a little bit more development. Still, I am not. I keep Andrew Miller. I mean, this is one of the best relievers you guys have had since Rivera. I'm keeping Andrew Miller no matter what. When you go into the season raving about the back end of your bullpen of Betances, Miller, and Chapman, you get rid of Chapman, which is fine. The Yankees are looking to go younger, and they Chapman doesn't necessarily fit into that go younger scheme. I understand he's not even 30 yet, but still, he's got some miles on him in the majors. To trade a guy like Andrew Miller, who is 31, who is a dominant, I'm not talking about good, I'm talking about a dominant pitcher out of the back of a bullpen. He's got an 11-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, which is unbelievable. Eighth highest amongst relievers in the past decade. You hold on to this guy to be the staple to the back end of your bullpen as long as you can, because relievers and closers do not come around often.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question of, do you go for Giolito, who's only 22, like you mentioned, not many starts in the majors, or do you keep that solid reliever and just have him to build upon later? But he is getting up there, like you mentioned, he's 31. I could understand it if they made the trade to just get younger, as they're not going to be contending for a World Series right now, and getting younger wouldn't be the worst idea for the Yankees in this trade.
It really wouldn't. And then you have the possibility of Tampa Bay just completely blowing up their starting rotation with Chris Archer and Moore, who are two guys that the Dodgers seem very, very interested in now, not knowing when you're going to get Clayton Kershaw back and having as many problems in that starting rotation as the Dodgers have. To that, and the Rays were just in Los Angeles this weekend for a 2-game series, and lo and behold, who were the two pitchers? The two pitchers that they're auditioning, Archer and Moore.
If the Dodgers get Archer, that's a great deal. He's still only 27. He's a great pitcher. This season has been a little rough on him, but if he can get back to his form last year and prior to that, he can really be a dominant pitcher in the major leagues. And unfortunately, with the Dodgers being in the Padres division, that won't bode well for him. But we're not contending anytime soon. So I don't know if that matters that much, but definitely if they get Archer, that's a dangerous team to watch.
The Dodgers always have had a they've always had an eye for the pitching rotation. I remember that one year where they had I forget the names. I know Schmidt was a part of that rotation. They had gotten a bunch of good guys. I believe it was like going into the 2007 or 2008 season. I think they had Schmidt. I know for a fact they had Schmidt. Um, why? I'm trying to remember who was a part of that rotation. Um, but I mean, the Dodgers have always had a great eye for pitching, and to go after a guy like Matt Moore or Chris Archer would definitely help with or without Clayton Kershaw. Going in with having those guys, having one of those two with Clayton Kershaw just makes them so much better.
With Clayton Kershaw, pretty much the most dominant pitcher in the major leagues right now, adding Chris Archer to that pitching staff or Matt Moore would definitely be an amazing deal for the Dodgers, depending on what they give up, obviously. But that, I mean, it's if they get Archer, look out for the Dodgers. That pitching staff could be, they could have what they had, I believe, was last year with Kershaw and Greinke, the 1-2 starters, the 1-2 punch of dreams,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Oh, and here you go. Derek Lowe was on that rotation. Brad Penny was in that rotation. Schmidt was in that rotation for 6 games. He must have gotten hurt early in the year. David Wells was there for 7 starts. Randy Wolf was there for 18. Chad Billingsley was there for 20. Yeah, there's a couple of big names out of the early aughts into the mids.
Yeah, that it was a great team or great pitching staff they had back then, and the Dodgers, they are known as kind of like the Yankees of not really a farm team, more just kind of paying guys ridiculous contracts to come to LA with such a who doesn't want to play in LA? And if they, this is a dangerous team already and on the brink of becoming a contender.
They definitely are, and they all they need is a couple of pitching pieces. You hear them talk about Yasiel Puig possibly getting traded because they're having problems with him on offense. Um, to get a guy like Yasiel Puig for any team would be absolutely fantastic. Um, but to me, the thing with Yasiel Puig that bothers me is the fact that Major League Baseball wants to fine him for if he wears his Vin Scully tribute cleats. I mean, for the love of God, is baseball that tight where you can't let a guy wear cleats who has been? I mean, we're not talking about some random nobody here. We're talking about Vin Scully, a guy who has been the Dodger announcer for 67 years. And you're really going to be that uptight about him wearing cleats to honor Vin Scully is just embarrassing.
Yeah, it's a bad look for MLB if they go through with this to not let him do that. But with that, we will move on to the scores. Frankie, I believe you have the scores for Major League Baseball yesterday.
Yes, I do. Yuri's Familia blows his second save in a calendar year. Not only his second save in a calendar year, but his second save in 12 hours. Yesterday, as the Mets lose to the Colorado Rockies 2-1, the Mets had a chance, bases loaded in the 7th inning, up 1-0 to expand the lead. And then lo and behold, it's the Mets, so they can't push any runs across. The Milwaukee Brewers beating the Arizona Diamondbacks 6-4. Yesterday, the Minnesota Twins over the Baltimore Orioles 6-2 in a one-day getaway game, make up for a rainout. The Atlanta Braves playing the Philadelphia Phillies. Phillies win 7-5. The Cardinals beating the Marlins 5-4. They now move into a tie for the second spot in the wild card, with the Mets falling a game and a half behind. The Chicago Cubs beating the Chicago White Sox 3-1 last night. Lackey over Sale. In that game, the Texas Rangers over the Kansas City Royals 3-2. The LA Angels beating the Boston Red Sox 2-1 in probably the wildest fashion you could possibly imagine. Boston goes into the bottom of the 9th inning leading 1-0. Okay, you follow this? Leading 1-0 going into the bottom of the 9th. Then Daniel Nava reaches on a force attempt throwing error by first baseman Hanley Ramirez to score Trout and Jan Mai Chow. I believe, if I remember seeing the play correctly, it was a It was a bases loaded situation, infield in. First baseman throws home and completely botches the throw. 2 run score, game over. How heartbreaking of a way to lose a game. That, and you also had one more game last night. It was the Washington Nationals defeating the San Francisco Giants 4-2. Tanner Roark over Johnny Cueto.
That is definitely a heartbreaking way to lose. And moving on to the scores for today, we have one game that already finished. That would be between the Chicago Cubs and the Seattle Mariners. The Cubs winning that one 12-1. The Mariners had a chance, bases low in the bottom of the ninth, but just they got 1 run, but it'd be very, very difficult for them to make up the 12-run deficit they were facing going to the bottom of the ninth.
That game just ended not seconds ago. So
Yeah. And so moving on at 7:07 Eastern, the Orioles facing the Blue Jays. At 7:10, we have 4 games, including the Astros versus the Tigers, the Yankees versus the Rays, the A's versus the Indians, and the Cardinals versus the Marlins. 7:35, the Phillies versus the Braves. At 8:05, the Royals versus the Rangers. 8:10, we have 2 games, the White Sox versus the Twins, and the Pirates versus the Brewers. At 10:05, the Red Sox versus the Angels. 10:10, the Diamondbacks versus the Dodgers. At 10:15, the San Francisco Giants versus the Nationals, and at 10:40 to close out the night, the Reds versus the Padres. And that will be it for today.
and as we typically do on a Friday, we'll end the show with some motorsports. The Verizon IndyCar Series will be in mid Ohio this weekend. Practice was a lot of rain during practice today, which is kind of why that big rain delay in the Cubs Mariners game wasn't all that big of a surprise. Formula One, for the first time in 2 years, will run the German Grand Prix this weekend from Hockenheim. They did not run last year at the Nürburgring as they usually would have due to financial issues. This will also be Formula One's last Grand Prix before taking their 3-week summer break, in which no crew member will be allowed to work on the cars, no development. It is a mandatory 3 weeks off before going to Spa at the end of July. The NASCAR Camping World Truck Series tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern on Fox Sports 1 from Pocono tomorrow afternoon. Pardon me. Tomorrow evening on the NBC Sports Network, the NASCAR Xfinity Series will be running in Iowa. And on Sunday afternoon, Martin Truex Jr. will lead the field down to take the green flag for the next Cup Series race at Pocono.
And with that, we will be ending our show a little early, but thank you all for watching this episode of Mix of Sports Live. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good rest of your weekend, and for Frank Marchese, we will see you guys later.